Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Thursday, October 27th, 2022. And we are starting off this day with the final committee of the whole for this term. I'm going to call us to order at 9:32 a.m. And I would like to acknowledge that the Sunshine Coast Regional District is on the traditional territories of the Squamish and the Sechelt First Nations, and we're very grateful to be here. We have an agenda in front of us today. Before we go to adopt the agenda, are there any items that need to be added or amended or deleted from this agenda? Looking to directors and staff. Okay, I don't see anyone indicating such, so if I can get a motion to adopt this agenda, please. So moved and seconded. All those in favor? Thank you. Motion carries. I'm going to ask for a motion to receive all reports, communications, and et ceteras. If I could, please. So moved and seconded. All those in favor? Thank you. Motion carries. So we have no presentations and delegations today. I would like to acknowledge that we have several, I understand that we have several of our directors-elect, our rural directors-elect are watching from within the boardroom today, and I'd like to welcome you and congratulate you. And this is how we've done it, so enjoy the show. And we will move on first to our reports, our strategic plan update. This is Annex A, pages 1 through 6 of your package. And our Chief Administrative Officer will be presenting this. Over you to CAO McKinley, please.
Thank you very much. The update is there, and we are happy to take any questions.
Okay. So I will look to directors. Do you have any questions on the strategic plan update or any comments? I'm not seeing any hands up. Oh, there we go. Director Seegers, over to you.
Thank you. On page 1, first bullet, it says new. Build regional capacity to respond to emergencies and disasters and support community resilience. So what does that mean? What are we doing?
That is the board's choice as a new item that emerged at the strategic planning review, and through the systematic work of trying to determine what the top priorities were, that was surfaced as a new priority, and it was also identified as the top priority. Since that's been identified, we have had some additions to the emergency program staffing, which has been good. And we've had several activations within the Emergency Operations Center, which has been, we don't get to plan for those, but the responses have been, I think, very effective. And what we're also hoping to do is do some more public outreach and make it more obvious what the emergency program is doing. And we're also doing work with the other municipalities in terms of making it a more truly regional emergency program. Some of that work was started with some initial conversations. Some of that momentum has stalled with the ongoing activations, I suppose. There are also potentially some budget proposals coming into 2023 that would be obviously connected to that as well. And I don't know if GM Hall has anything he'd like to add that would aid this or not.
Thank you, CAO. I would add to that list a recent intergovernmental training opportunity that saw more than 20 staff from all over the region participate in EOC training, as well as a number of grant applications led by our new emergency management coordinator, and integration of the recent climate vulnerability analysis that was conducted through our Sustainable Development Division, which is feeding into updates to work across the spectrum of our emergency preparedness. Thank you.
Thank you. Excellent.
Over to Director McMahon, please.
Thank you. We have a priority around social equity. And I noticed that we're kind of struggling with it. So I was wondering if we could expect some budget proposals or other upcoming ideas around how we are actually going to implement this worthy goal.
CAO?
Thank you for the question. We have been working on a new way of gating project ideas using a new project development format, and we've had some meetings recently as we're trending towards the first pre-budget sessions for budget 2023. I'm trying to remember, we've reviewed probably well over 150 project ideas, and I can't remember off the top of my head how many were directly tied to social equity. So it's a good question, and something that we can take back and look through as we continue to go through this list of potential projects for 2023.
Okay, thank you, CAO. Director Ties.
Yeah, thank you. And I guess it's been a while since we've had this meeting, and I'm sure we probably discussed it, but just trying to get a refresher on where housing fits in all this, and affordable housing, and the housing crisis.
Go ahead, CAO.
I'll see if GM Hall may have some insights on this. I mean, there is work going on funded through a grant on housing, but it still does not remain within the services of the regional district, a housing service per se. Ian, did you have anything you could add to in terms of housing in general on the strategic plan and what we're doing?
Thanks for the question. Yeah, interesting question, since housing is not front and center in the strategic plan, but from a staff perspective, I think we apply a housing lens to anything that is in the strategic plan. And the flip of that would be, we have a number of board-supported projects and initiatives underway, including a housing coordinator funded through municipal regional destination tax, and a bunch of planning work that's just kicking off that certainly both supports affordable housing and housing diversity and is aligned with the strategic plan. Thank you.
Okay. Director Kroll?
Thank you, Chair. I notice both in 2022 and 2021 top priorities, development of a growth management plan. I'm interpreting that to be a regional growth strategy plan that would encompass, the municipalities and the nation. And I'd just like to, perhaps that if it's not the intent of it, should be the intent of that comment, or that bullet in both 2022 and 2021.
You? Or GM Hall, maybe.
Thank you, Chair. The staff have not been directed to initiate a regional growth strategy as framed in provincial legislation. What staff are working on right now is a regional growth framework and a baseline study, and we expect that work, which I think it's reported in the very detailed table that follows this report. It was somewhat delayed, but it's back on track, and we're wrapping it up, and we expect to be reporting it to a committee later this year. And that will lead to some decisions that will need to be taken about where we go from the findings and recommendations of that report. Thank you.
Okay. Director McMahon.
Yes, I was just wondering when the newly elected board can expect that we will be revisiting the strategic plan.
Staff.
Apologies, I completely missed the question. I'm having a few technical issues here. I've had to exit the meeting, and I'll try to answer sharing the screen with Tina.
Yes, just wondering when the new board will take a look at the strategic plan.
That will be up to the new board. And staff are serving at your pleasure and willing to take on that work as soon as assigned. Hey, that was an easy one.
Okay, Director Ties, over to you.
Going into the detailed spreadsheet, page 6, very top, the water meters. Where are we at on getting that installation going, and what do we have any rough timelines that we can hope to expect?
Thank you for the question, Director. We are currently finalizing the RFP, and given the size of this project, it's in the order of magnitude between $7+ million. We would like to have it do it right, because there are significant financial risks otherwise associated with it. So we're doing our best to get it out as soon as possible, but we're still planning for or anticipating that first meters will be in the ground next spring.
Okay. Director Ties, a follow-up.
Yeah, follow-up. When do you expect the last meters to be in the ground?
Thank you. I could have expected that one. I think it will be up to the contractor, but I can totally see that it might take a year for everything to be completed.
Okay. Any other questions on the on any of the strategic plan updates? Any comments on? I know the board, our key focus has always been around advocacy, and we've really taken the lead on that. If there's any comments that anyone would like to make on those items or anything else, otherwise we'll be moving on. Going once, going twice. And moving on over to our, thank you very much, CAO and senior staff, for that strategic plan update. And on we go to our second item on the agenda, item number 3, I should say, Annex
Chair, I'm
B.
just going to cut in real quick. We actually have a recommendation here on
Oh
page
my
1.
goodness. Thank you very much. Trying to get everything sorted between devices and everything here. So thank you, Director Toth. So yes, we do have a recommendation, my apologies, on page 1 of the package. And that is for that this 2022 strategic plan review amendments be adopted and incorporated into the 2019-2023 strategic plan. May move Director Seegers, seconded by Director Kroll and others. Any further comments? All those in favor? Thank you. And thank you for keeping on top of me, Director Toth. Next up, we have the MNP LLP Audit Service Plan for year ended December 31st, 2022. This is item 3 on our agenda, Annex B, pages 7 through 30 of the package. And we have our illustrious Chief Financial Officer to start us off on this conversation. Go ahead, CFO Perot.
Thank you, Chair. So this particular audit service report in front of you is in preparation of the SCRD and also our foreshore leases for Hillside audit that's going to be undertaken in November, and the final audit would be concluded at the end of March with financial statements presented to the board for approval and adoption at the end of April. The audit report is a communication tool to the board to identify any items related to the fiduciary responsibilities of the board. And if there are any comments back through MMP, then they will be relayed back to them. There are components where MMP does typically meet with our board chair to also identify any concerns or issues related to the audit. We also have included in the audit report some follow-ups to the management letter that concluded in the 2021 audit and some follow-up to those, and those will also be followed up as part of the audit for 2022. We'll have any questions if there are any. Thank you.
Perfect. Okay, looking over to directors. Are there any questions from you on this? Director Seegers.
Thank you. We'll start with page 9, bottom of page 9, volunteer firefighter honorarium. I know that this software, I believe, was purchased a year ago. And I mean, I know we've had shortages in IT and all kinds of other issues. Do we know when this software is going to be installed and implemented?
CFO?
If I could clarify, Chair, through the Chair to Director Seegers, is it related to their honorariums or software to support that? Because those are two distinct differences. The honorarium review for our volunteer firefighters is underway. We're actually just negotiating a contract, and we hope to conclude that sometime in Q1 2023. There was some software as well that hasn't quite been implemented, but that was a different type of project as part of the, I think, data, but I'll defer to GM Hall on that one.
No, I know the software is to manage the training, right? But that also will tie into some of the honorariums as well, because it will keep track of the training that they actually are doing. Right. Thanks.
GM Hall, go ahead.
Thank you. Director Seegers is correct. There's an interrelationship between the policy and the implementation and monitoring of that policy, and we have work afoot to address both of those. And I expect that as CFO Perot said, by the end of Q1, we'll be in a much more sophisticated position and better able to support our not only what our auditors are asking for here, but also our volunteers. Thank you.
Thank you. Director McMahon.
Yes, about financial plan amendments, I mean, it's not surprising we've had a lot of them, given the number of emergencies that we've had and also the number of quotes that are coming in significantly above what had been budgeted. So I'm guessing that this is a problem across regional districts across the province. Is there, would you know if there's any discussion going on about how this is impacting regional districts and whether this is being taken into consideration with amendments to the legislation that are underway right now?
Go ahead.
Yes, so on November the 15th, I'll be attending a Government Finance Officers of BC Forum for Regional District Finance Officers. And on that particular agenda, I will be bringing forward this item for discussion. This is where some of the policy for our financial planning policy identified, because in conversations with other regional districts, we were sort of on the high side of amounts of financial plan amendments. So I still seek guidance from my peers in other regional districts, but also other local governments. And I think what's unique is with a regional district, you can't really merge funds. So I think that's where we kind of are in a very unique situation to get guidance from my peers for regional districts. As far as the legislation piece, I'm not aware of if that is one of the items that'll be addressed or identified. If they segregate from the type of fund accounting, which I think would be quite a challenge based on the regional district model and service participants. So time will just tell to see where that goes.
Director Seegers.
Thank you. I have a follow-up to that one, and I have another question. So if nobody else puts their hand up, I'll go into the second one. I know that one of the conversations we've been having is about delegation policy. So how much senior staff, for example, can approve without board oversight. Would that impact this as well or not? Are they totally separate?
They are separate items because typically financial plan amendments means that the item isn't in the financial plan, and it's typically something that's somewhat material and or part of a contract approval. So it could mitigate some of them, especially when we have contract changes. Say we have a vehicle that ends up being $10,000 or $20,000 or $30,000 more over that $100,000 threshold. If the delegation bylaw was a little bit over that and we could find the funding, it's where when we use funding that somewhat restricted, like reserves, so you'd still need a financial plan. So it could potentially mitigate a few of the financial plan amendments.
Thank you. I'll wait till after Director Hiltz.
Okay. I'll go Director Hiltz and then back to Director Seegers and then Director McMahon.
Thanks, Chair. I'm on page 11. There's a statement in the management response. It's about an independent internal review. And I'm just trying to understand independence and internal. They seem to be kind of independent, seems to be external. So is it internal, external, and how do you do an independent internal review, I guess is the question. That's on the management response. Thanks. You find the line? Or
Is it to observation number 1 or observation number 2?
Observation number 2. In the management response, this involves independent internal review by both divisions. This is about the flow of information through the organization.
Yeah, so this was in conjunction with our auditors to verify that our process, so it was really to ensure that we had a business process that would ensure this was addressed. And so we obviously consult with our auditors for them to review. So we did an internal review, they validate it, they say, okay, that's fine, that sounds reasonable, and we carry on.
Okay. Director Seegers, then Director McMahon.
Thank you. Same page, page 11. And this is observation number 1. It's talking about district's human resources policy hasn't been updated since 2008. And this is, I haven't been seeing anything come forward on this, so how are we making this a priority within our HR department, and who's holding who accountable? Thanks.
I see Senior Manager Parker. Will you be taking that?
I'd be happy to, and if CAO McKinley has anything further, I'm sure there can be some additional comments. I'm pleased to advise we've made considerable progress on this benefit policy. We have updated most of the sections that are in there. We've added a number of new sections that didn't previously exist. And then we got a little bit, I'll say, sidetracked by the review that was conducted by WorkSafe BC, which drew our time and attention towards addressing the safety program. But the policy is largely complete. We are following the principles contained within there, and I expect it will be completed this quarter. Thank you.
Okay. CEO McKinley, do you have anything to add to that?
The only thing I'd add, and thank you for the update, Jerry. We've had a number of conversations, HR, finance, and CAO, just about ensuring that the priority is given to these items that have been outstanding for some time.
Okay. All right. Now, Director McMahon, I thought I had you on my speakers list, but I see your hand is down. Did you have the same question as Director Seegers? Perfect. Okay. Directors, any other questions before we move the recommendation on page number 7? See, I remembered it this time, Director Toth. Director Seegers.
Thank you. I'll move the recommendation as on page 7.
And do I see a seconder? And are there any other comments or questions? Seeing none, I will call the question. All those in favor? Thank you. Motion carries. All right. Moving on to the next item on our agenda, which is Annex C, pages 31 through 136 of our package. And number 4 on your agenda sheet is the Sunshine Coast Regional District Q3 Corporate Financial Variance. And I see our Manager of Financial Services is here. Mr. Wing, will you be presenting this?
I will. Thank you, Chair. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can hear you just fine. Go ahead, sir.
Excellent. Okay, thank you. So this is our quarterly variance report that we present at the end of the second and third quarters every year. We present final variance surplus deficit positions as part of round 2 budget in February. This report, one caveat with this report that we always like to point out is there are obviously a number of accruals and estimates that go into any kind of quarter end reporting, just due to the timelines that we're under. So the value should be noted that they could change if things come up after the fact that we weren't aware of. But for the most part, we are confident that the numbers are reflective of the current position. Moving through the report, we always look at revenues, particularly user fee revenues, as those tend to vary from year to year. And we are seeing some pressure in the recreation division this year, and that revenues have not returned to pre-pandemic levels. Those are being monitored very closely. They're in part due to facility closures and that are ongoing. So with that, there are lower expenditures. Overall, that service is holding in a surplus position at this point, but we are going to be keeping a very close eye on it. And certainly, the division is aware and they're on top of things there. Moving on to expenditures. Overall, we are within budget on expenditures, but we are definitely seeing the impacts of the overall inflationary trends that we're seeing in the macro economic environment, particularly with respect to our core operating budgets, where we typically run around 90, 91, 92%. We're closer up to 100% as of the end of Q3. So we're certainly seeing things tighten up there on the expenditure side, namely with respect to fuel, materials, and supplies. Those are certainly where we're seeing the biggest unfavorable variances, as would be expected with what's going on. So again, we're monitoring those closely and definitely looking at that closely as we move through the current year's budget process. The overall surplus deficit position at the end of Q3 is roughly $2.5 million. Approximately $1 million of that has been derived from salaries and wages due to temporary vacancies or timing of new hires that were approved. What's important to note there, although it sounds like a big number, in comparison to Q3 of 2021, we were showing a $3.9 million surplus at that point. So considerably less than what we saw last year. And of course, in line with the trends that we're seeing. On pages 33 and 34 of the report, there's a listing of functions with deficits greater than $1,000. This includes any functions that we reported deficits on in the second quarter that have turned to a surplus position. There's a few there that we are expecting will end the year in deficits. Rural planning, school facility joint use, fleet services, and the wastewater services are a few of the key ones that we're expecting to see year-end deficits with. Lastly, I would just want to thank Director Hiltz for pointing out that the summary report on page 37, I believe it is, there are some inconsistencies where how the brackets are shown in the variance column. So some that you would, we like to show surpluses as a positive and a deficit would be a negative, and Director Hiltz has pointed out that I think consistent in that column. So thank you for that. We'll have a good review of that and clean that up on the report side. With that, I'll take any questions.
Well, thank you, Manager Wing. I have a bit of a speakers list here, so we'll start with Director McMahon and then over to Director Ties.
I just wanted to dive a little bit more into the community recreation facilities because $265,000 is a lot of money. That's the biggest one. And that is entirely due to what do we usually get in registration fees for our programs? Or is this also including ice use, or what's driving this? Thanks.
Okay, Manager Wing, did you want to take this or?
Yeah, I can take a shot at it. Certainly the ice use would be the biggest factor here. That is the largest revenue component of the recreation budget. And so we've seen a delay in the opening of the Seashell Arena this year. We also saw there was no spring ice last year. So we would expect, because of that, we'll see the revenues down. And going with that, there are less operating expenses to go with it. So, it's certainly the main driver, but I believe the other thing would be pass revenue. Just kind of your annual passes have not, they are trending upwards, but it hasn't returned to what we saw pre-pandemic. So it's the other area of concern. Yeah.
And I see GM Gagnon is with us. If you wanted to add anything to that, GM.
Certainly. Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Manager Wing. It was a very good answer. In our user fees would include program registration, it would include point of sales, it would include admissions and pass, as well as rentals. So in Q1, we still had COVID restrictions, which limited class size and the amount of people in the building. Those got lifted, but we are seeing a slow recovery to people coming back. It is starting to happen, but it's slow. We also have, as the board is well aware, we have some capacity challenges within our lifeguards. So we are not able to offer the same number of programs that we normally do, which then impacts revenue. And then last but certainly not least is some of the unanticipated closures that we've had of our facilities throughout the year and the delay in putting in ice at SCA, which was based on level 4 water restrictions similar to last year, but has of course drawn out a little bit longer. And rentals, of course, are a significant revenue generator for us as well. So I hope that provides more clarity on what is in that line item. Thank you.
Director Ties and then Director Hiltz.
I was actually going along the same vein and just wanting to see if there's any more predictions as to how the shortfalls or the variances are going to increase or decrease as a result of these closures from the stage 4 water, as a result of the stage 4 water restrictions. Thanks.
GM Gagnon, do you want to take that, or Manager Wing?
Sure, I'm happy to. And then if Manager Wing wants to add, that's great. So we have done our forecast to the year end, and we are not forecasting a change. We are going to not meet our budgeted revenue. But on the flip side of that, we also have fewer expenses. So our staffing expenses are down, our contracted services are down, but of course they are not, it's not a one-to-one type of relationship because user fees don't completely cover the cost of operating the facility. So as Manager Wing discussed, we are watching it very carefully. We are forecasting a deficit position potentially. It's not showing up in Q3, but we don't expect to make great gains in our revenues in the next 3 months, but we'll be watching it and making change where we can. Thank you.
Director Hiltz.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks staff for helping out with the brackets. I wasn't sure if my glasses, I struggle with that over and over again, so thanks for clarifying it. I am on page 33. It's a function 117, the information services. There was an error detected, and I'm just wondering if you could sort of a detailed review. So like kind of the staff process for identifying an error. Is this systems error, human error? How do you process these once you find it? I was just like, what triggered the review and how you managed it? And you found it, which was great. So thank you.
Manager Wing, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, I can take that one. Thank you. So staff will periodically review operational budgets to identify any potential capital items, capital expenditures, or one-time project expenditures that have been miscoded to the operational budget. And that is precisely what happened here. So we identified two hardware items that had been coded to the operational budget that were intended to be part of the base capital renewal plan budget. So we moved those over, and that was the reason for that was the error and how we caught it. So.
Director Hiltz, that works for you? Perfect. Director Seegers and then Director McMahon.
Thank you. Sorry, other mouse. There we go. Page 32. So we have some favorable variances. So transit, solid waste, building inspection. What is behind those, and are we going to be seeing budget decreases next time to take into account changes, or what's actually contributing to these?
So I can take that one.
Yep. Go ahead.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. So in transit, we are currently budgeting less than pre-pandemic revenues in terms of ticket and fare sales. That's with guidance from BC Transit, obviously through the annual operating agreement. And the mitigation for the reduced fare revenue is the COVID Safe Restart funding that was provided as well. So what we're seeing here is just actual revenues, ridership that is likely exceeding what was anticipated as far as the AOA. I would say that it still hasn't returned to pre-pandemic levels though, but I believe it's getting close. With respect to solid waste, that would be related to tipping fee revenue, which is obviously volume based. So if we have more tonnage coming over the scales, then we're going to see higher revenues as a result of that. I believe there were some changes to fees this year as well, but I don't think they would be material enough to be driving the needle on this number here. So it's definitely related to tonnages, and that's typical of what we see kind of over time. As the community grows and if the economy's booming, there's a lot of construction. It tends to come in waves like that. So it's definitely something to monitor going forward. Whether or not those same values will be seen in future years. We'll need to keep that in mind as things move along here with the overall economy. For building inspection, again, those revenues are tied to building permit issuance, which is tied to the value of construction. So that's not a significant variance overall in terms of the revenue they're bringing in. What I would say there is the trend we're seeing from Q2 to Q3 is kind of a reduction. It was a more favorable variance at Q2 than it is at Q3. So I'm not sure if that's indicative of the beginning of a trend downwards, or if it's just reflective of what came through the door in the third quarter. But certainly with building revenues, because they are tied to the value of construction, the permit fees, we certainly see big swings in that depending on what's coming through the door. Thank you.
Director McMahon, and then over to Director Lee.
I'm throwing this in completely out of left field, which I realize. But if I recall correctly, the community recreation facilities budget includes our community halls, or are they in parks budget? But they are rolled into one of the budgets there so that it's difficult to pull out the actual numbers of what it costs to run our community halls. And knowing that Cooper's Green is coming up in a couple of months for discussion, I was just wondering whether there's any possibility of getting some more information on the costs of operating our community halls. The last report we had on that, I think, was 2012. And I appreciate you may not have an immediate answer on that one. Thanks.
I can take that. Okay. So to answer the first question, yes, community halls are budgeted within the community parks service. As far as the costs, we do track the cost of the halls, direct costs as best as we can. So I don't have that information at hand, but we could certainly have a look and bring that forward if the committee wishes to see that.
GM Gagnon, did you want to add anything to that?
Thank you, Chair. My only comment would be further to Manager Wing is that the direct costs are tracked. I'm not sure that staffing costs are necessarily tracked that way, but we can certainly do our best to try and pull some estimates together. We did so, I think, in one of my previous reports from Cooper's Green Hall, provide an estimate of what it might cost the SCRD to operate the hall, similarly to how we operate other halls. But certainly, if the board wishes additional information, we can provide that. Thank you.
Director Lee and then Director Seegers.
Thank you, Chair. On page 62, we're talking about bylaw enforcement, and I see a $16,000 user fee and service charge. I don't really understand what that is. I'm guessing it might be fines, but I don't know.
Manager Wing, do you have that?
I'm just pulling it up here.
Perfect.
You said page 63, sorry?
Page 62.
62.
At the top, under revenue.
Yes, that is absolutely related to fines for bylaw tickets.
Thank you.
Director Seegers?
Thank you. I have another question, but I'll go back. I'm going to go back to the recreation piece. I know when we implemented the One Pass, we also consolidated the revenues and expenses for the recreation facilities. And we've been looking to find out what each facility is costing us. You know, what are the expenses, what are the revenues per facility? Because one of the things we're going to need to look at some point in the future is, do we continue to operate all these facilities? If we can't break down the expenses and the revenues, then it'll be hard to do that. Staff had starting to look at that breakdown to provide more detailed information. I'm wondering where that plan is in place, or where's it in progress, on how at what point we'll be able to have that information.
GM Gagnon?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the question. That is a significant undertaking, and I am happy to report that we are undertaking it. And we do have a goal to be able to begin to report, or at least have an understanding of the separation of costs beginning in January 1 of 2023. We would begin to separate and have that information. So it might take us a year from then to have a fulsome understanding, but we are working toward that and have been for several months now. Thank you.
Thank you. Good to hear.
Okay. I'm not seeing any other hands up for any other questions. Director Seegers?
Sorry, I'll come back to my other question.
Okay.
Bottom of page 34. 34 and the top of 35, we're talking about the wastewater plants and the deficits. So I'm assuming that what will happen is these deficits would need to be covered next year by the participants in those functions, but you could probably clarify that. Thank you.
GM Rosenboom, over to you.
Thank you for the question. Yes, these deficits will be considered as part of our rate proposals that we'll bring forward in December. And per each of the facility, we'll do an assessment to what extent these deficits can be covered from current reserves, or they would need to be covered from user fees or frontage fees next year.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. Now, is that the end of our questions, or directors, do I have anything else from you? Okay. Oh, Director Ties. I'm just about to move on. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just surprised looking at page 33 bottom and the top of page 34 that our elections ended up being more expensive than expected, considering the high number of acclamations. So just wondering, what will our elections costs look like if people are actually getting elected?
Oh, that's a good question. I see our corporate officer has turned on her camera. So Corporate Officer Reed, over to you.
Hi, thank you for the question. So a couple of things I can mention. First of all, we haven't done our invoicing to the school district or to Gambier Island Local Trust, and we also coordinate elections for them. And further to that, up until September 19th, we were organizing production of an election for all rural areas. So that meant procuring halls and election officials. So all of the heavy lifting that had to happen operationally had to happen. And then on September 19th, when it became apparent we had the acclamation, we have to rearrange the chessboard at that point, so to speak. So it doesn't necessarily reduce our costs, the fact that we have acclamations, but we will recover many of those costs through the elections that were held for the school district where there were no regional directors, where there were no voting opportunities for regional directors.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Corporate Officer. Okay. All right, so we don't have a recommendation. We've already received the report. So thank you very much, Manager Wing, for presenting, and to our other GMs for being there to help answer a few questions. Up next, we have number 5 on our agenda sheet, which is Annex D, pages 137 to 144 of your package. And this is the status of reserves and holding funds at September 30th, 2022. And we have CFO, are you taking this one?
Yes, thank you, Chair.
Okay, go ahead.
So this particular report is presented a couple of times a year, and so this one is up till September 30th, so Q3 of 2022. We have changed up the report a little bit to really give a snapshot of the various, really an overview of how much, what the financial health of the regional district is I guess the best way to put it. And so we wanted to ensure that the committee and obviously the oncoming board, as we head into our 2023 budget, understand that our reserves and various funds for funding and the status of them as we head into. We've also, in attachment number A, we have done a summary to really articulate the various committed and uncommitted funds. And what that means is now as we're approving capital plans, so say the community recreation capital reserve, that particular reserve, although there is currently $1.5 million worth of reserves in that particular funds, they're somewhat committed as far as a policy decision from the board as far as what those funds are going to be used for in future years. So those are not available to fund other projects is really what is meant to be articulated here. They're not available to pivot. There would have to be a change in policy or service level decision. So I believe this does articulate some really better understanding as to where we are financially overall. And so this will obviously be supplemented as part of the budget documents as well in making some of those decisions, and that is in consideration of how future projects will be funded as well. We also, for this year, we have started to include more information as far as our summary of government transfers and amenity funds on attachment D. There was a recommendation last time this report was presented to get some more history on that particular one, so staff are undertaking that. We didn't quite have the capacity to present it for here, but we'll endeavor to provide that as soon as possible to a future committee. So otherwise, we'll take any questions if there are any. Oh, I just wanted to mention one other thing. The regional district doesn't have a reserve policy right now, and so why that is because we didn't feel that we had enough capital and asset management plans to really be able to give a very good understanding as what the floors needed to be or what some of the policy decisions needed to be. However, I have put that on our service plan for 2023 for the new board's consideration because I believe we're at a point now where we need to make some decisions on that.
Thank you, CFO. I have Director McMahon and then Director Seegers.
Okay, I have lots of questions today, but just, you know, one thing that's obviously happening right now is that interest rates are going up. And that's bad news for borrowing, but it's good news for, you know, any savings that we have that we're going to gain more revenue. So are rising interest rates good news, bad news, or neutral, just generally speaking?
CFO, over to you.
It's a loaded question, but I'll enjoy answering it. So it really depends on what our current financial situation is. So we currently have total commitments of over $31 million. And so it depends on the timing of those cash flows. And it's also the reciprocal as to how much debt load we have. And so we have over $23 million in 2022 forecasted to be budgeted for debt, for either short or long-term debt. So what those are Church Road up to $9 million. We have the metering program that's also part of that, and several other equipment financing loans, et cetera. So what's going to happen is, because we haven't issued security issuing for those longer-term loans, for instance, Church Road would be a 2023, probably spring security issuing, we're probably going to be paying more interest than we anticipated. Obviously, that's why we're presenting a lot of sensitivity. So what that balances out in each service is really dependent. We are analyzing that now to really understand what the financial health is on both sides of the equation for each service. So for instance, some of our long-term investments are receiving something like 5%, and our long-term debt is maybe just under equal to that, but they're longer term, so it kind of balances out. So what that means in the overall service has to be analyzed for each independent service. And obviously our focus right now is the regional water function. Right now is because that's where most of the pressures are from the debt and the reserve side of the house.
Okay. Director Seegers.
Thank you. On page 137. One of the ones I've been following closely is the landfill closure and the commitments that we have there. So I noticed that for 2022, we have sufficient funds to cover off the commitments that we've made, but net investments, just under $2 million. We're putting $900,000 in. Will that cover the commitments that we're going to have in 2023? Like, what does the timeline look for money coming in and money going out?
So each year what we do is we do an assessment of what the airspace, so what the last projection as part of the 2021 audit had a closure projection of the landfill for, I think it was the end or mid-year 2025. What we're doing with Stage H and some of the assessments is whether or not there's ways to extend the landfill, and what that will directly correlate to the landfill closure post-closure. This particular liability is calculated based on a public sector accounting standard, 3150, which will now roll over into the new asset retirement obligations. I don't think there'll be any significant change to that, but I think this particular liability reflects not only the closure, so when the life of the landfills, but it's also the post-closure responsibilities. So it doesn't mean that we necessarily all have to fund this particular liability from a cash flow perspective immediately on that date of closure. It means we have some commitments 25, 30 years, maybe even 100 years down the line. So we'll still have likely a responsibility to continue to fund those particulars. So the $900,000 really is to ensure we have enough money to do those larger closure. And so right now we have Stage H that also hasn't been tendered or it hasn't gone out to market. So we have to understand what the actual cost of that's going to be and how much life we have left. So we assess it on a regular basis. So right now, I think we can meet our financial implications from a cash flow perspective, and we'll continue to monitor. I'm hoping for the 2023 audit letter, we'll have more information on all of that to be able to forecast going future.
Okay, I think that's what, I mean, it's a large sum of money. And, you know, going out to the community to fund that, if we can lower some of those peaks, right? So gradual increases that will provide us the funds over time so that we have it when we need it. I think that's kind of what we're looking for. It sounds like that's what the work you're doing. Thanks.
Director McMahon.
And just following up on that, if we are able to get another 3 years out of the existing landfill, that significantly improves our financial picture. I would think it really is buying us time that we could really use. I just realized, I don't know why it took me this long, but we have, you know, a lot of these reserve funds are very small, like the ones for wastewater plants and stuff, and they are absolutely dedicated that you can only spend them on that plant. But our 4 recreation facilities are actually lumped together. So that means that the reserves there could be spent on any one of those facilities, and then you can get into a political discussion of, you know, having the facilities compete against each other for the reserve funding. Is that the case?
So the capital plan that's presented to the board, I don't know if you recall or if anyone recalls seeing, we do identify each particular facility. So for instance, next year's capital plan for 2023, which the draft was presented this past July, forecasts a lot of work to be done in the Gibsons Area Community Center. So yes, there are various, it's treated holistically, as in the service overall, but it does provide the board details on where those capital investments are going on an annual basis and where the peaks and valleys are going to be. Obviously on the books there's several discussions about what we're going to do with those older facilities and what the long-term vision for recreation is, so I know that definitely that's on the horizon for GM Gagnon to address going forward.
That's, I just had a vision of the Hunger Games recreation style. May the odds be forever in your favor. Director Heltz.
Thanks, Chair. I'm having to get over your humor and get to my list here. Yeah, first of all, yeah, thanks for the report that it is a more complete, you know, picture, and particularly with the community benefits and amenities. And the recommendation is a future committee. So will that information be in time for the 2023 budget? There's small amounts of money. I'm thinking like the Box Canyon as one the area F might be interested in using in some way. So will that information be ready for budget 2023? Thanks.
We will endeavor to do that.
Excellent. Okay, Director McMahon and then Director Toss.
Little tiny question, but why does Area E Grant and Aid have an operating reserve?
Is this called Stump the CFO now?
Yeah, I believe there's a prize for that.
Oh, excellent.
That sounds like an error.
Oh, I see Manager Wing. Manager Wing.
Yes, I think I know the answer to this. You said Area D grant and aid?
Area E.
Area E grant and aid.
So there is
Roberts Creek.
Yeah, there's
Oh,
B,
okay.
Yeah, so there's B and D.
Okay.
And those were related to the feasibility studies for the curbside recycling. And so what occurred is last year we tried to return all the tax funds, and so there was investments that we didn't quite catch all of them. So we hope to continue to return those to the taxpayers in area B and D. So yeah, you did stop me. I did not recall there was an E.
Okay, so area B and D. So, okay, great. Okay, Director Toth.
Thank you, Chair. On page 143, looking at the gas tax and DCCs, sort of triggered me. We've got the DCCs for the various water services, and I'm just wondering, when was the last time the rates that we charge were reviewed? And do we have any plans within the current work plans to review those DCC projects and levels? Thank you.
I see Remco is online. I can answer and see if he wants to circle back. 2013 was the last time we reviewed our bylaw and the respective projects, and I do believe as part of the future that we look to address that. Go ahead, Remco, if you like.
Not really a lot to add to this point. The plan is to, as part of the water strategy, to first identify all the projects that we actually would like to complete in upcoming years, and at the same time review our rate structure. And I think once we have both components in place, I think there's a good opportunity to also review the DCCs. So that's currently scheduled for 2024.
Terrific. Director McMahon.
Okay, just one more. I noticed there's a considerable operating reserve for the cemetery, but then we just had a cemetery plan come forward, so I'm guessing that a fair amount of that is going to be expended in the fairly near future. Would that be a good guess?
I see GM Danielle. Oh, you're mute. There we go.
Thank you, Chair. Apologies for the hesitation. I wasn't sure if GM Perot was going to take this or not. So certainly we are preparing budget proposals for 2023 to meet some of our immediate and critical needs in the cemetery for the continued provision of services. How we fund those, we're pulling together that information over the next few weeks, and that will show up in pre-budget, but there is a potential to use reserves, but I need to have that final discussion with the CFO. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, so I'm at the end of my speakers list. Directors, anything else at this point? Seeing nothing. Thank you very much. So that was Annex D of our package, and we are going to be moving on to Annex E, which is, just one moment, number 6 on our agenda package, Annex E, pages 145 to 148. And this is Gas Tax Community Works Funding Update. And I'm CFO Perot. I'm imagining you are introducing this one as well.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So this particular report is just to present the status of the fund, so similar to the reserves. So more detailed information regarding the Community Works gas tax, or what's now called the Build Canada Fund. So this particular item 2 will be, or these particular funds definitely are going to be considered as part of what the plan going forward is for the 2023 budget. So there are, these particular funds, as you know, are separated or allocated per the rural areas, and that's based on the gas tax model, which the funds received are per capita, and so they're divided per capita, and I believe they're based on the new census values too for 2021. So in front of you here, you can see we have uncommitted funds of over $6 million, and we have had an ask from UBCM, because the new federal gas tax agreement is going to be renewed in 2024. They're really looking for us to have commitments into how to spend these going forward. And I know what's been discussed as well as there has been directives in the past on to how we can potentially use these for regional projects as well. So these will be part of the considerations of funding opportunities for 2023 proposals, especially as we have lots of community needs, especially in water and solid waste, and we definitely have some constraints with sources of funding. So that will be for consideration for the new board.
Okay. Great, thank you. Directors, any questions? Director McMahon.
Oh, I'm just getting on my platform again to say that really we need to be able to spend some of this money on climate change mitigation and adaptation. Because that's one of the most urgent needs facing us right now, and it's kind of frustrating that I feel like we're kind of handcuffed in how we can spend this money. It's a resource, and resource needs, how do we get them together? So is there any hope of negotiating with UBCM to get some flexibility on where we can spend these funds?
CFO, did you want to take a stab at that one?
Yeah, I believe at a previous meeting, we kind of raised this somewhat, and with the new agreement, there is an opportunity, I think, and I don't know if it was action to whether or not to communicate with UBCM on the desire to give some feedback related to the gas tax. So we can follow up on that. And we also, definitely there are some items related to climate resiliency and adaptation. Right now, the way the program is structured is that eventually whatever you use the funds for lead to a capital asset. So that's where some of the challenges from climate resiliency, so doing planning for those types of things, may not necessarily be eligible unless it leads to some sort of mitigation from a tangible capital asset is really where you actually have something tangible there at the end. So there are some opportunities, and we are continuing to look for that. So whether or not there are things like, you know, generators that are e-generators, so looking to potentially items to reduce any carbon footprint. Those are types of lenses that we're looking for the 2023 budget. And as well as, you know, there's lots of infrastructure needs. So Area A, for instance, is looking for water mains replacements, and those are definitely needed in those particular areas because of the small service area and the magnitude of cost to do those particular capital investments. So it's a balance with those particular funds, but I know there's lots of need, but we definitely need to address it for each area.
Director McMahon, a follow-up, and then I'll go over to Director Seegers.
Yeah, it just occurred to me. So one of the issues in my area is that some of the area has old water mains that don't have sufficient flow for fire protection. There was a case a couple of years ago where a house burned down because there was no nearby, well, at least that a major contributing factor was that there was no nearby fire hydrant, and it was because the water main was old and too small to support a fire hydrant. So are those kind of upgrades something that we could potentially look at for gas tax funding?
Yes.
Okay, Director Seegers.
Thank you. I'm not clear, and I don't know if the other directors are clear, who actually sets the priorities for how this money is spent? It comes from the federal government, I believe. So, and then UBCM administers it. So is it the federal government that sets the priorities or sets how it actually works, or is it UBCM? And because we need to know where we actually have to do the advocacy.
I don't want to guess to the answer to that. There is a federal agreement that outlines the priorities. I believe UBCM has some input into the negotiations of those types of things, but I'm not quite sure who sets the priorities. We'd have to get back to the board on it.
So that might be something to follow up with our MP and our MP's office to find out where that is, who has input, you know, to get some of that information forward, potentially impacting the agreement that comes out. Thanks.
Yes. Well, and I know there's a lot of our residents would like to see it go directly into pathways and walkways, but there's also, you know, that provincial component that Ministry of Transportation should be actually doing any road work beside the roads. So, and even though we may have that jurisdictional memorandum of understanding between UBCM and Ministry of Transportation, there's still, as Director McMahon said, there's a lot of climate mitigation issues that we have that these funds would be very well spent in that area. So with that, so that's the end of Annex E. I don't see any other questions. I've had a request for a bit of a break. Is 5 minutes sufficient for everyone? Director Lee?
I was clicking buttons and clicked the wrong one.
Oh, okay, very good. All right, so let's say 5 minute break. So come back at 10:46, if that works for everyone. Sounds good. We will see you in 5 minutes. And welcome back to Committee of the Whole for October 27th, 2022. And next up on our agenda sheet is item number 7, Annex F, page 149 through 151 of our package. And this is 2135203 Seashell Landfill Cover Material Contract Extension. And I'm going to go over to our General Manager of Infrastructure Services, GM Rosenboom. Over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Purpose of this report is to request a contract board approval for a contract extension for cover material for the Seashell landfill. Cover material is used on a daily basis to cover areas where, at the active phase, where garbage has been placed for burying. Last year, we did a request for proposals. The winning bid was made by Celis Environmental Group, and we're very pleased to work with them. And so that's why we're proposing another contract extension with them for the period of 1 year. The additional, last year, in year 1 of the contract, we ended up using more cover material than was predicted. And as a result, the costs were about higher. And those additional costs were related to that we were filling in an area at the landfill where there was a higher demand of cover material required. So we have an estimated additional budget required for year 1 of $18,520, and the extension, the budgeted amount for the first year of extension will be $106,000. And I'm happy to answer any questions you might have. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, GM. Okay, Director Seegers, over to you first.
Thank you. So just for clarification, we budgeted for, the original contract value was $75,000. It's actually going to be now $93,520 for the first year, and then $106,000 for the next year. So
that's correct.
Yes. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, Director Hiltz, over to you.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, thanks for the report. Just a quick question on cover materials. That cover materials are not organic; they're inorganic. They're essentially like soil that's placed and would be mined from some location and transported. Is that what we're talking about when we talk about cover material? So just the context of where this material comes from and what it consists of. And thanks.
Go ahead, GM Rosenboom.
Thank you for the question. Yes, indeed, cover material is usually a silty clay material that is used to cover areas to prevent, to make it more stable. Actually, and we're already mixing in sometimes wood chips to actually reduce the amount of cover material that we're actually requiring and to reduce the cost. And those wood chips are actually treated wood that has been chipped by our contractor and then brought to the landfill.
Excellent. Thank you. Director Lee, I noticed that you put your hand down. Did you still have a question, or?
No, it was the same question as Director Hiltz. So, thank you.
Fantastic. Director Seegers, I see your hand still up. Do you have? Nope. Okay. All right. So we have some recommendations on page 149 of the package. May I have a director move those, please? So moved and seconded. Any other questions? Seeing none, I will call the question. All those in favor? Thank you. Motion carries. Thank you very much, GM Rosenboom. Up next, we have Annex G, which, just bear with me one moment. It's always the scrolling struggle to get through here. So Annex G, pages 152 of to 162 of our package. This is number 8 on your agenda sheet, and this is Development Variance Permit Application DVP 00082 for 13230 Pine Haven Way. And I see we have planner Chris Humphreys in here to present this report. Go ahead, Mr. Humphreys.
Thank you, Chair. The purpose of this development variance permit application is to reduce the setback to a parcel line abutting a strata access route to facilitate construction of a single unit dwelling with garage. The parcel is limited in size and contains a large centrally located bedrock protrusion, making it difficult for the applicant to construct the garage portion of the residential structure fully within the minimum setbacks. The applicant proposes to reduce the parcel line setback to construct the single-story garage unit portion of the residential structure near road grade, while averting significant alteration to the bedrock protrusion. Notifications were emailed or mailed to neighboring properties per statutory requirements, and no comments have been received. Due to the site's constraints and the applicant's measures to mitigate significant land alterations, staff recommend issuance of this variance permit. Also, the property owners, Mr. Brian Edwards and his agent, Callie Angus, I believe, are in attendance today. Thank you very much.
Excellent, thank you. The applicant and the landowner, if they're in the audience and would like to speak, if they could, I'm sorry I can't see you because I'm not in the boardroom, but if they would like to speak, if they could indicate so. Otherwise, I'm going to go over to Director Lee to open up discussion on this item. Go ahead, Director Lee.
Thank you, Chair. I actually took the opportunity to circulate this to my APC members. I'm not going to recommend that it go to the APC. It's a unique situation in a strata with the road actually being a private road. So the public really doesn't have any considerations on it. So I just wanted everybody to know that. And when people are finished asking the questions, I'd be happy to make a motion.
Okay, terrific. Director Ties?
Yeah, just I guess one comment would be it would have been a little bit more, well, it would have soothed my anxiety a little bit more had I seen that the neighboring property had actually endorsed it, knowing that there's a lot of absentee owners that might not have gotten the correspondence in time. But I'll defer to Director Lee with his recommendations.
Director Hiltz?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Quick question on the referral agencies with respect to the Sechelt Nation. You're waiting for comments, and is there a timing issue with the relation of the issuing of the DVP and receiving comment? Thanks.
Okay, over to Planner Humphreys.
We are still waiting. The Sechelt Nation had requested additional information specifically regarding tree cutting on the parcel, and we've reached out to the agent a couple of times to get that information for them to understand how it might impact the development itself and this particular variance. We don't anticipate a lot of tree alteration happening on the parcel, as most of the structure is on the western half of the parcel away from most of the trees, but we are trying to get that information for them.
Okay, I see GM Hall and Manager Jackson have turned their cameras on. Did either of you wanted to comment on that? Go ahead, GM Hall.
Thanks, Chair. Just really briefly, we do continue to prioritize communication with the Sechelt Nation, and we also always reinforce landowner responsibilities under the Heritage Conservation Act, which is one but not only the thing that we hear about as part of our referral process with the Seashaw Nation. Thank you.
Manager Jackson, anything to add, or?
GM Hall had most of my comments. The other thing I could quickly add to the conversation is that this property also is subject to a development permit area for coastal slopes. So that application has been concurrently reviewed by staff, which does look at sort of the holistic picture of the site development. So between those two application types, you know, we've been able to see in this situation that the applicant has done what they can to try and mitigate implications both on the coastal slope sides of things and tree retention on that side by pushing the development back closer to the road. So with all those sort of combined pieces, we're able to feel comfortable with moving this forward, noting that the applicant is still working forward to a building permit process, and through that they are also subject to the Heritage Conservation Act. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Manager Jackson. I'm just going to check in and see if the applicant would like to make any comments before we put this motion on the floor. Are they within the boardroom? Nope. Okay. And we don't have them in the attendees list here. So, Director Lee, I will go over to you as this is your area. I need your microphone on, please.
Yeah, sorry.
Thank you.
I'd like to make a recommendation to accept, I'd like to make a motion to accept the recommendations as presented on page 152 of our agenda.
Excellent. And do I have a seconder from that for the rural areas? Thank you very much. Any further questions or comments on this item? Seeing, oh, GM Hall, I see your hand up.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to procedurally check whether there's anyone else in the gallery that that considers that their interests are affected by this and might want to comment on it before a decision is taken.
Okay, well, thank you, GM Hall, for that point of order. I appreciate that. Is there anyone else in the gallery that does wish to speak to this item? Either online, if you could put your hand up, or if you're in the boardroom, wave madly at the directors or staff that are in there. Okay, interpretive dance, anything? No? Okay. So seeing that, we have a motion on the floor. It's been moved. It's been seconded. There's nobody else to speak to it. So I'm going to call the question to endorse the staff recommendations on page 152 of the package. I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? Thank you. Motion carries. Next up on our agenda, we have Annex H, page 163 of our package, number 9 on your agenda. And this is contracts between $50,000 and $100,000. So July, August, and September of this year. And this is our Manager of Purchasing and Risk Management. And over to Ms. Kropp. Over to you, please.
Thank you. So this is just our quarterly report to you guys. So I'm happy to answer any questions that you guys may have. Thank you.
And you're more than welcome to ask us any questions too, Ms. Kropp. But I'll go over to Director Seegers.
Thank you. I'd just like a few more details on the first one, Powerline Computers Limited. I know we're putting the thin client and stuff in place. Is that what this is, or what is this for? What did we buy?
Manager Kropp, go ahead.
Yeah, so that's for the 10 zigs. So we call them the zero clients. So it is for when we convert it over to allow us to have the ability to have Zoom meetings and those. So it's that software update.
Okay, thank you. Director Hill.
Yes, thanks, Chair. I'll just put my hand down. It's on the housing coordinator. Just wondering what the period of the amount goes to what period of time? Is it past or is it into the future? I'm not sure if you have any details on that. Thanks.
Manager Crop, are you able to answer that?
Thank you. I don't remember the actual term of the contract, but it was for about a year. And I know it didn't run calendar to calendar, so it's probably half spent and about half left, a couple months left. Ian Hall, if GM Hall is on still, he might be able to actually give us the time.
Yes, I do see GM Hall's hand up, so over to you.
Thank you.
Thank you for the question. The contract, I believe, expires in March, and staff are preparing a report with renewal options for the end of this year, as we have received the contribution for affordable housing from the MRDT again, and so a decision about the use of those funds will have to be made by the board. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, GM Hall. Okay, and I'm assuming that's had Director Seeger's question or comment right there. Perfect. Okay, any other comments or questions for staff on this item? See none. Thank you very much, Manager Crop. And we will move on to the next item on our agenda, which is the last item on our agenda. And this is Annex I, which is pages 164 to 165 of the package, and number 10 on your agenda sheet, which is the Director's constituency and travel expenses for July, August, and September. And Manager Wing, I see your camera on. Over to you.
I am here. Yes, thank you. So this is just the quarterly update that we provide, and this will include any expense claims received up to October 7th. Take any questions.
Okay. Directors, I will start off by saying I need to get some reporting in or some expense reports in before the end of my term. So, and I know staff will be communicating with directors on what when we have to have those in, what the drop dead date is on those, I'm assuming. So directors, any questions or comments? Okay, I'm not seeing any. Okay, thank you very much. So with that, we're at the end of our agenda. We had no correspondence or anything else. So no communications, no new business. We're not going in camera. I will ask for a motion to adjourn, and then we will go and see if there's any questions from the audience. I'd like to say right before we adjourn that this has been my very last meeting that I will be chairing for the regional district. And it's been a pleasure. And with that, I'll ask for a motion to adjourn, please. So moved, seconded, all in favor. Thank you, motion carries. So we will go for our attendees list. Anybody that is attending virtually, if you could raise your hand if you have any questions. And then within the boardroom, I'm going to rely on my directors there to let me know if there's anyone who would like to ask any questions. No questions? In our virtual gallery, any questions there? Is there someone with a question?
We do have a question, Lori.
Okay, perfect. If you can go up to the microphone and identify yourself, and I feel blind because I can't see whoever's asking. So if you could identify yourself at the microphone and then ask your question, please.
That one here. Right. I'd just like to say thank you, Lori, for all your hard work, and I'm sure that everybody in the new board and everybody that's continuing from the old board will miss you, and I'm sure the door's always open here for you.
Okay. Was that Kelly?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Thanks, Kelly. I don't want to cry. I've cried enough. Really. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure and a labor of love. I've got to say that. So, thank you very much. With that, I'm going to go find a Kleenex and dry some tears, and we can shut this down. So thank you, everyone, for being here today, and we'll see you at one of the series of meetings that we have later in the day. So, all right, we will see you online later. Bye-bye. Bye-bye now. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.